order to reach the state-required goals, 70% renewable energy by 2030 and 100% by 2040. There's no way we're going to reach those goals unless the public sector moves in.
Welcome to Climate Check, Stories and Solutions for Fighting Climate Change. We are part of 350 Brooklyn, an organization that strives to counter the climate crisis through local action. We work towards a world that is just, equitable, and sustainable, and where all beings can thrive. I'm Eva Dean, she, her, your host of Climate Check. I'm a climate activist and a Brooklyn-based choreographer. On today's episode, we're talking about the campaign to decarbonize CUNY, the City University of New York. Our guest is lifelong social activist Nancy Romer, who is one of the leaders of the decarbonization drive. Nancy is Professor Emerita of Psychology at Brooklyn College, which is part of the City University, as well as a leader in the CUNY Union, the Professional Staff Congress, or PSC. She is a founder of the PSC's Environmental Working Group, which is coordinating the decarbonization effort among CUNY faculty. Hi, Nancy. Welcome to Climate Check.
Thank you.
Would you introduce yourself with your pronouns?
I'm Nancy Romer, she, her, and I'm happy to be here.
Can you tell us how you got involved with climate activism?
When I was a little girl, my dad was working for the New York City Department of Health, and he was in charge of making sure that the New York City water supply was safe. And every time I went into our one bathroom in our two-bedroom apartment, I would see water testing bottles hanging from the shower curtain rod. So I learned early on that environmental issues were important, but I didn't really take them on until I understood more about climate change. I became an activist in the early 70s, and I have never stopped organizing since. I think my overriding framework was how to engage the greatest number of people in the decisions of our society. And so I guess I'm really primarily an organizer for democracy and secondarily now for climate.
Let's get started by asking you to tell us a bit about CUNY decarbonization. How did that get started?
The process really started about 45 years ago with Reagan and the decline of the public sector. So as the public sector was being diminished, underfunded, defunded really, CUNY took the brunt of it. We were at the forefront of the New York City financial crisis in the mid-'70s, and CUNY has never really recovered from that. Of course, that dovetailed with the much greater inclusion of black and brown students during the early 70s, and we were dramatically punished for lifting up working class people of all backgrounds, as were most public institutions. So our buildings and our physical plants deteriorated as such. We never really were able to maintain our buildings because we never had the operating budget to do that. So our buildings have deteriorated, our heating systems have been very poor, our cooling systems poor. I remember giving an exam in late January in a lecture hall that was so hot that everyone took off their socks, their shoes, their outer garments, and the women in the class were complaining, it's not fair. The men are taking their shirts off, and we can't.
Yeah.
What a waste of carbon.
Yeah.
You know, we now know that that is a terrible way to heat our buildings.
And cool.
And cool. And of course, during the summer months, we hear from the higher education officers who do the administrative work for CUNY that they have to wear down jackets in the middle of the summer because their offices are so overly air-conditioned. And almost all of the energy that is being used to cool and heat our buildings are fossil fuel energy. This is insane. We're heating the planet, we're adding to climate change, and we're going to be paying for it in lives and in dollars over the coming years.
Before we get into the heart of CUNY decarbonization, what does decarbonization mean?
It means many things, but primarily it means getting rid of fossil fuels, conserving energy wherever possible, and making sure that carbon does not get emitted from our buildings, from our vehicles. When it comes to decarbonization at CUNY, we're really talking about the buildings. In New York City, 70% of the carbon emissions are from buildings, 30% from vehicles. In most locales, it's the opposite.
So CUNY, it has 25 campuses spread throughout the 5 boroughs, and it's the 4th largest university system in the United States. What would decarbonization look like across the whole CUNY campuses?
Well, it would look varied. We have some of our campuses are in office buildings where we're renting space of maybe 3 floors of an office building. That decarbonization will have to take place mostly external to those buildings. The energy will need to be generated elsewhere and brought in. For a campus like Brooklyn College or the College of Staten Island could easily have extended solar panels. Some could even have some wind turbines. On many of the campuses, we will be able to have geothermal networks, and now that is fabulous. The key thing that is so important to understand is that renewable energy and cleaning up the carbon footprint of a building, a campus, an area is so much dependent upon the particulars. So it's very hard to generalize. Each campus will have to be tested, for example, for geothermal. It's not possible everywhere.
You're indicating just how complex this is. Where are you at now in the process? Are you in the very beginning of the process?
Yes. I wish I could say something other than yes, but that's where we are. I'm working with my union, the Professional Staff Congress of CUNY, that represents the 30,000 full-time and part-time faculty and professional staff at CUNY. So we have a stake in this, not only for ourselves, but for our students and for our planet. We have an environmental justice working group that I co-chair that is robust and active, and we've been leading the charge on this. So we had 10 campuses that participated in town hall meetings in order to do popular education on why we need to decarbonize, what the state of the particular campus was, and how do we get this moving forward. And they were very successful. They were well attended and great speakers, and people really had a better understanding at the end of it that we need renewable energy and some of the pathways to get it.
Where are you going to get the money for this project?
So the New York Power Authority is empowered to float bonds to pay for projects. And they have a very high bond rating. So they could float massive amounts of bonds. And lots of, particularly pension funds, are looking for pro-social investments in which to put their pension funds. They also want more secure investments to balance out the riskier investments that they make in the stock market. So New York Power Authority bonds would be a big winner. And of course, the big pension investments in New York State, the New York State Common Retirement Fund and all of the New York City funds would be prime purchasers of those bonds. So that's one big source. The Inflation Reduction Act, which will be in effect for a little bit of time before Trump tries to dismantle it, will be a source of payback once a project is completed. So the Inflation Reduction Act says that when you complete a decarbonization project, the Inflation Reduction Act will return 50% of the cost of that project. Now, one might say, well, won't Trump try to get rid of the Inflation Reduction Act?
I believe he will.
I believe he will too, but I believe that he's not going to be able to do it so fast because there are a lot of congressional representatives and senators from red states that are the primary recipients of the Inflation Reduction Act. Texas, for example, is the greatest producer of renewable energy. So I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk to get rid of the Inflation Reduction Act. It provides a lot of money for these renewable energy projects, and it does not harm, for better or for worse, fossil fuels. So it's not a bill that requires the decline of fossil fuels. So we don't really know where that will land.
Right.
And one other thing to say is it's distributed to the states. So it's up to the states to then give out the money. So we will see what happens with that. Another source of funding for CUNY decarbonization is through the capital budget. We can increase the capital budget from the state of New York in order to improve the climate and health conditions of the public sector.
So the capital budget, talk a bit more about that.
Okay.
That's in New York State you're talking about.
The capital budget is the part of the budget that supports the ongoing investment in the structure of the institutions that are being supported by the state. They make sure that there are improvements in the physical plant. They would do things like improve the renewable energy development at CUNY or at SUNY or the public schools. Also, we are very much interested in expanding taxation of the rich and the corporate tax. They can pay for these investments. We need to be able to be bold in New York State and say, this is the way the country needs to go. New York State can be a model, along with California, for how the Democrats or how the blues, not only the Democrats, would be able to lead on climate change and on education and a number of other really important factors. We need to model what we want to see the whole country do.
Can you tell me about New York Power Authority?
Well, it provides energy for the public sector, and that has always been its central mission. And when it can sell energy to the private sector. New York Power Authority was started by the wonderful Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he was the governor of New York in the 30s. And he felt that there needed to be a public power authority that is publicly owned and controlled in order to meet the needs of the people in the state that wasn't controlled by profit motives. Right now, the only substantial renewable energy is hydropower that NYPA provides.
Okay.
The rest of it is, like over 70% of it, is fossil fuel based. So the question is, okay, what is the New York Power Authority going to do? The Build Public Renewables Act indicates the responsibility to expand dramatically to fill the need for renewable energy in order to reach the state-required goals, 70% renewable energy by 2030 and 100% by 2040. There's no way we're going to reach those goals unless the public sector moves in and provides that energy, because the contracts with the private corporations have been reneged upon by those corporations because they can't make enough money out of them.
I want to hear about Public Power New York.
Public Power New York is the coalition that has come out of the effort to advance the Build Public Renewables Act, which requires the New York Power Authority to expand its development and distribution of renewable energy. It's really been the spark plug and the intellectual heft behind the effort to get the New York Power Authority to live up to, that is, to implement the Build Public Renewables Act. One thing that many people don't fully grasp is that passing a bill is really important, but it's only step one.
Yeah.
Implementation is really important because all the players that didn't want the bill to be passed to begin with, once it's passed, they organize themselves to try to limit the implementation. So Public Power New York has been the powerhouse to push forward the expansion of the New York Power Authority to provide renewable energy for New York.
Can you tell us more about the Build Public Renewable Act?
The Build Public Renewables Act was a brainchild of the Democratic Socialists of America, eco-socialists. How can we think about public power? We know that we can't rely on National Grid and Con Ed to provide renewable energy at a reasonable cost. What are the opportunities out there? And in our study of these possibilities, a few things grew. We saw the importance of advancing public renewable energy, and we supported this bill. We brought the idea of supporting the bill through resolutions to our statewide affiliate, New York State United Teachers, which represents 800,000 teachers in New York State, including the faculty and staff at CUNY and SUNY. We got the Senate and the Assembly to support the Build Public Renewables Act, and the governor signed it. And I think she signed it because she could see that there was a lot of labor support.
Yep.
When the initial bill was written, it did not have as robust a set of labor agreements and labor requirements as it ultimately had, thanks to the labor movement's input. Now we are in the stage in which the New York Power Authority has produced its draft proposal for what it plans to do over the next 2 or more years.
How do you feel about the draft proposal that they created?
It's anemic.
Yeah.
It's very weak. It does not at all meet the needs, and it will definitely not bring us up to the goals of the New York State Climate Act. There's no way.
So what can we do about that?
Well, we can pressure the New York Power Authority to expand. There have been public hearings all over the state during the month of November. These are publicly required public hearings. Unfortunately, there was only one day of hearings in New York City, November 20th. There was a morning hearing and an afternoon hearing. Not enough opportunity for people to...
Why so few? I mean, that feels like an old playbook that the private sector, energy sector does, is to not give enough hearings to hear what the people want.
Well, it's a playbook that the public sector uses too. It's not
That's what
only
I'm
the
saying.
privates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because
Yeah.
they're not really all that interested in hearing from people. I'll just give you an example. The first hearing was in Buffalo, and they decided to have the hearings at the New York Power Authority headquarters, which is about a half-hour drive from Buffalo. So very few people showed up.
Yeah.
If you want to hear from people, you have to make your hearings many
Right.
and centrally located.
Right. We're having the hearings. How do we get New York Power Authority to listen, to make the plan more robust?
Comments are really important. Because it's a state-mandated hearing process, the comments that are part of this public process have to be part of the deliberations of the New York Power Authority Board of Directors. We all need to participate. You can read the strategic plan, including the highlights, on the New York Power Authority website. They don't have to be very long comments. They don't have to have a huge amount of detail. One of the things that's very important is for people to say why they think it's important that we decarbonize the state and why we decarbonize public buildings. Using your own personal experience is really important. The quality of submission is important, but I actually think the quantity is more important. Hochul needs to see that there's a big constituency out there, and we want renewable energy now.
Your union's Environmental Justice Working Group that represents faculty and staff, how has CUNY administration responded to your efforts so far?
Minimally.
Oh, why is that?
CUNY management wants to have complete control over the process of decarbonization, over the budgets, and they don't like when the union sticks its nose into things. And I think that's true for almost all management and unions. I mean, we don't have absolutely aligned interest. We have invited the administration of each of the campuses in which we've had town halls, we've invited them to speak. We've also invited the New York Power Authority to speak, but very few have come. It's unfortunate because we could be allies. And we've said to them, we're not bucking you on this one. We want to work with you, but they don't believe us.
Right.
So they don't utilize our energy and our ability to teach and our ability to learn and participate. And it's very foolish on their part. It's because very few of them are educators, in fact.
They're administrators.
They're administrators.
Yeah.
They're the boss. And it's really unfortunate. They resist the alliance of going to Albany for more money. They don't join us in demanding more money for CUNY. It's crazy that the heads of agencies should be asking for more money for their agencies. And maybe they're doing it without us knowing about it, but they don't seem to want to join hands to do that work together.
Right. What about the students? What role are they playing? Or do you hope they might play?
They are good allies. I think there are a lot of students who care about these issues. There are a lot of students that are environmental studies majors, and there are vocational programs, particularly at the community colleges. So I think the students play an important role. One of the problems that we have at CUNY is that our students are extraordinarily overburdened. Most of them live at home with their families, so they're embedded in family networks that require a lot of time and attention from them, especially when crises arise. Most of them are from poor and working class communities and families, and those families tend to have more crises and require more from their family members than more privileged families would. And also our students work, almost all of them at least part-time and a large portion of them full-time. They really don't have extra time. Once their classes are over, they are out of the campus and back to work or back to their families. So our student activism is going to be more limited than it would be at private colleges. That said, they care a lot about these issues, and they want to participate as they can and as they know about it, but it is incumbent upon our faculty and staff to help them learn about these issues, and that's what we try to do.
Were there students at the town halls?
Yeah. The majority of attendants were.
Well, that's heartening.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
How can our listeners get involved both with the CUNY decarbonization, but also with very individualized ideas about how we want to see change and movement towards green energy?
You certainly can go to psc-cuny.org, and you can see what we're up to. And you can email me, nancyromer@gmail.com. They can go to NYPIRG, New York Public Interest Research Group. They can go to Sunrise. I think they need to go to Triage's website. Those are 3 venerable organizations that they can plug into and check out. The United Federation of Teachers, which is the union local that represents the public school K through 12 teachers and paras and nurses, they have a new environmental justice committee as well. There also are a lot of other organizations that you can contact. New York Renews and Climate Works for All, and of course 350 Brooklyn. One more that I should definitely include, and that is Public Power New York. They have been the guiding light for the Build Public Renewables Act and for all of the hearings and efforts to influence the New York Power Authority, and I should have put them at the very top of the list. So it's good to shop around a little bit and see where you feel most comfortable, which organizations sort of speak to you best and are convenient for you, because not all of these organizations appear on every college campus, and you need to find something that's compatible for you.
Nancy, is there anything that we missed that you'd still like to talk about?
I really feel very strongly that people need to join in community, and they can't just be mass communities. They have to be small communities where you actually know the other people who are working on the same projects as you are, and you develop friendships, you fall in love, you have fun together, you hang out, and you have a commitment that you share, and it improves your life. It doesn't just improve the environment, it improves your life. I think it's one of the things that really is missing in a social media milieu that we're all in, that when you can look at someone and see them and see that they're like you and a little different, it's wonderful, and you have more belief in yourself and in your possibilities. So that's part of what we're building too, a real sense of community. It's political power and environmental power.
Absolutely, beautifully said.
Thank you.
Activism is the antidote to fear.
That's right.
And let's try to move together in hope. Powerful, relevant, heartening work. Thank you, Nancy, for the work that you're doing to decarbonize CUNY.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Climate Check, Stories and Solutions. Thanks for listening. To subscribe, go to climatecheck.fm. Climate Check is a production of 350 Brooklyn in Brooklyn, New York. Stay up to date with our releases by following 350 Brooklyn on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Our production team is George Ostro, Eva Dean, and Eveline Mole. That's me. Our research and writing team is Mimi Bluestone, Audrey Stanton, and Megan Eisenberg. Eva Dean is the executive producer with co-leader Audrey Stanton. The music you heard in this episode is from Blue Dot Sessions. 350 Brooklyn is a local affiliate of 350.org, a worldwide grassroots climate organization. Join us in finding solutions to counter climate change.